Welcome. This is the third installment of our webinar series covering deployments in Azure. We have already gone through estimating the costs using the Azure Cost Estimator and deploying the software-defined data center, the Active Directory structure, the RDS and HTML5 gateways, and so on. And now we're ready to actually deploy the tenant. We're in the CWMS portal looking at a data center. There's some basic information about the data center. You can see the platform server down here. You can connect or you can click on it and see some information about it. If I had been running backups, you would see those here. You could restore backups from here. One thing I want to show you is that you can actually connect to this machine as a local admin from right in here. Clicking the button is going to bring you through to an HTML5 portal. You put in your credentials. These are the level 3 technician credentials that we covered in the last step. And you've got local admin access to this environment. You can go look at log files, you can install stuff, you can do all the things you would do as a local admin. Next, you can see a series of platform processes. So as things are happening in the platform, like a new user is being created, deleted, a server cache is being built, and so on, those steps will be processing here, and depending on what's going on, you'll have different options like to start, stop, restart, and so on. You can also see a history of all the tasks that have occurred in this environment. If I move this back a ways, we should be able to see some. And so you can look at all of the different events that happen in this and look at their details to see who asked for what and when. There's also a few settings that we're going to define at the data center level. The first is resource defaults. So one of the things that CWMS does is manages the size of each of your machines. There's 3 different resource types. There are shared resources. These are the terminal servers. There are data resources. These are non-terminal servers. These are app database file servers and so on. And then there are power users, which is also referred to as a VDI user. This is the one-to-one relationship between a user and a machine. So you can define the defaults for this data center here. For example, if I'm looking at the shared one, my allocation method is currently fixed, which is just you pick a machine in Azure and that's the one that it uses. So for example, maybe if I wanted my my fixed machines to be a B4MS, a 4 CPU, 16 gig of RAM box, it's burstable, I could set that allocation method and it would be fixed. There are some automation options here though. So you can have it automatically decide the size of the machine based on the number of active users. So this is looking back over the last 2 weeks, what's the average number of users that connect, and you can have the formula go off of that. So maybe you want 2 gigs of RAM per user and 1/4 of a CPU. And we don't really need machines that get up to 240 gigs. We're going to want to expand horizontally and add additional machines. So let's limit this to like an 8 CPU, 64 gig of RAM box. Once you reach that, it's going to either send you an email, or if you've defined it, it'll actually automatically clone the server and put it into rotation. Another way that you can have this increase and decrease is based on server load. So both RAM and CPU, you can have top and bottom thresholds defined. Again, it's over a look back 2-week period, and when your systems are exceeding whatever threshold you set, it'll increase the size, and when they are below the bottom threshold, they will decrease the size of these machines. The same server capacity is available here, so when it gets to a certain size, it will scale out by cloning machines versus continuing to grow a machine larger and larger. The third option is based on user count. This is the same as the active users, except for there's no look back period. It's just the total number of machines, or total number of users, I'm sorry. So we can set these defaults here, and we can do the same thing for data servers and for VDI machines. But then when we're in the tenant, we can also set up exceptions or change the settings to not follow the data center defaults at all. You can also set up backup defaults. So there are several types of machines that you can set up different backups for. Again, there's data servers, and now instead of being called shared servers, we've split that out into terminal servers and terminal data servers. When you deploy an environment where the file server and the terminal server are on the same VM, we call it a TSD. If it's just a terminal server, we call it a TS. You also have the power user. These are the VDI users. We also have infrastructure. So this is the platform server, the one we've already deployed that's got the RDS gateway, the HTML5 gateway, and so on. We can define the default backup schedule for that, as well as if we have templates, we can define the backup schedule for that. So I'm looking at a terminal server here. I probably don't want to really back up terminal servers as much as I do the data server, the terminal server and data center. We'll come in here and edit it. And this is going to implement the Azure backup service. Through APIs, we're going to call backups at certain times, and we're going to choose how long we keep them. You can do it as frequently as once a day, or you could pull it out and do it every, once a week at a certain time. You can also choose retention policies. So how many daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly backups do you wish to retain? It's worth looking at the Azure backup pricing model, because making these changes will impact your cost, and it's a little bit complex. There's a protection cost based on the size of the disk it's protecting, as well as a storage cost based on the size of the backups it creates. Again, these are defaults that we can change once we get back into individual machines inside of the tenant. We also have provisioning collections. This allows you to create a collection of one or more virtual machines with applications assigned to it, so that when you do deployments, it gets spit out in a completed, predefined way. We can look at this one to see what that means. So here we've got a provisioning collection that has a single server. It's going to come out as a TSD server. It doesn't have any, well, it does. It has Choco installed. Maybe I'm also going to do Microsoft Calculator or Firefox, right? So we're going to go through and kind of predefine how we want this environment to be. We can choose a cache level. So this will keep a certain number of VM templates essentially built and ready to be turned on and run. I'm going to keep it at 0 because I don't need that right now. You can also choose the drive where that share is going to be. Typically we'll do like the iDrive. In Azure, C and D are not available. D is a temporary disk that gets created, so you have to choose something past that. If you wanted, you could also have it spin out a data server, pick it from a VM template that's native in Azure or one that you've built yourself. Let's do, doesn't really matter. And then we'll pick the storage type and add that server. Now we've got 2 servers in this provisioning collection. We'll show you where provisioning collections are used here in a moment. A little bit of data is available here for when you are helping your customers connect. If they're not using the Windows Cloud Workspace client that automatically configures their gateway and server address based on their username, you have access to that here. So you can point them at the FTP server, the RDS gateway, and so on. Next, we're going to look at what it's like to create a new customer. So this is going to be the tenant that's inside the data center we just created, and I'm going to go through and actually create a new one. We're going to pick the company name and login identifier. This is going to be what's after their username in their login. So Joe at Acme Fuel, for example. We're going to define the primary email address that gets notifications about this tenant. In the service provider world, this would be perhaps a service desk email address, support at company name or something like that. Phone number, this is all internal information for your team to use and reference in the UI. It's not used by CloudJumper to send any automated notifications or make any calls to the customer. Put in their mailing address. And now we can pick the data center. This is that SDDC that we just created on our previous step. We're going to choose the data drive, like we just talked about. I'm going to choose I. We'll choose the home drive. This is how the user's desktops and documents are presented to them. H is a pretty common one. And then the FTP drive. If we selected FTP when we deployed the software-defined data center, this is the drive where contents that are uploaded and downloaded via FTP are displayed. There's also some settings we can apply. uh, at a global kind of tenant-wide level at this step. Those include enabling remote app, which will allow us to stream applications or a desktop from the same environment. App locker, which will lock down access so that users can only open apps that you have given them access to, something we're going to cover in the next session. You can enable workspace data user storage so that they have a home drive and that they can save things in their desktop and document. Pretty commonly that one is checked, obviously. If you have certain compliance requirements, you can disable printing out of the environment. We can do security settings, so you can permit the users to to open up and use the task manager. We can require a complex user password, and if you want, you can enable MFA for all users, and this is going to force all users to go through an MFA process when they log in to their desktop. MFA is a free feature included in CWMS. You can also use it to secure the web portal for your administrators that come in and manage these environments. So I'm going to add the client, and I'm going to go through this wizard. As you can see, here's all those same settings that we just looked at. Next, I'm going to choose the operating system, and this is where provisioning collections come in. So I have one that's a default, but I'm going to click my default provisioning collection. It's going to inherit whatever apps I had set up. In this case, there are none because I like it to just start fresh. But if I wanted, I could come in here and check more boxes for more applications that I want to have spit out at the end. We're then going to add users. If we're running in an Azure Active Directory structure and there are already users in there, they'll show up here and I can check the box for which ones should have a cloud workspace environment. Or you can come in here and create one. We could turn on multi-factor authentication for him as an individual instead of across the whole environment if you'd like. And we can choose here whether or not he can access his he can access his local drive from his cloud environment. So if he checks this box, the local drives will be mapped through automatically into the cloud environment. He can drag and drop, copy paste from his cloud desktop into his local hard drive space. We haven't touched much yet about the Wake on Demand feature. When we schedule environments to be turned off, for example, overnight or on the weekends, we can enable certain users to wake up the environment by giving them this feature. You may or may not want to enable your end users to turn on the environment and therefore consume additional costs in Azure. But if you want to, you can turn it on here. Again, these settings can also be changed once you're managing the environment on a day-to-day basis, something we're going to cover in a future session. You also have the ability to make this user a VDI user. VDI again means one-to-one relationship between the user and the VM. They have a dedicated machine they're going to use in the cloud. They don't share it like a terminal server. And from right here, we can pick which template we want. You could do a Windows 10 machine, you can do a Server 2016 machine, whatever you'd like, and choose the storage type. Depending on the template, you'll have different storage types. At this point, you can also create a custom template in Azure, install all the apps you want, do all the configuration you want, and have it show up on this list as well. So you can just pump out users after users after users with the same VM. And if you need to make changes later, update the template and push it back out to all the users instead of updating all 50 of them, for example. So I've now added Joe example to our Active Directory. I've checked a box so he can be deployed. We're going to continue on through. Just like when we did the CWA setup, we now have reached the end of our wizard for deploying the tenant, which is inside of the software-defined data center. Clicking provision is going to run a series of API calls to build the environment, configure it, add the user, put the machines in the right security groups and users, and all the things it takes to deliver this environment in a best practices manner. I'm not going to click provision because I don't actually want to deploy this environment, but that is what's going to get us to a deployed environment where we're ready to work. We're going to start and take some questions, but before I do that, I'm going to stop this recording and we will catch you next time.